Immigration is something that is being spoken about all over the Western world. Electorates have, for many years, been trying to vote in a way that reduces it, and it hasn't happened. And indeed, in Britain, we have seen huge numbers come, not just since the beginning of the Blair premiership back in 1997 and Cameron's government coming in 2010, but particularly under Boris Johnson's leadership and what is now being called the Boris Wave. Such are the giant numbers. And indeed, I think one of the most recent years of records, which had initially been estimated of 708,000 net immigrants, which had deducted the 500,000 who had left the country, has now been revised upwards to closer to 920,000-30,000. And there's this feeling that over the last 5 years, we might have welcomed in up to 6 million new people into the country. From where you're standing, Sam, what does the Boris wave, and perhaps even more repeated waves post-Boris, mean for the social contract in Britain?
Sure. Thanks so much. That was an unnecessarily glowing intro. You didn't give too much credit. Look, the social contract point is really salient, and there are a couple of things at play here. First thing at play is democracy. So one of the basic expectations of the social contract in a democratic society is that when you vote, you're broadly listened to. And no government has won an election since at least 1974 on a promise of higher migration. No one has ever won on a promise of higher migration, and everybody since 74 has explicitly promised lower migration. Right? So it's not about reading the tea leaves. We know exactly what people think and what people want. Politicians can't say that the public hasn't got a clear will on this. And that, at the basic level, that's kind of step one of where the social contract's going wrong, is that people have been promised that if you vote for things repeatedly, you'll get them, and they haven't. There's also a deeper problem around the social contract. You may have seen this kind of internet meme that floats around. Nicolas Sertillon, the kind of beleaguered French professional. And the idea is basically that hardworking, working-age taxpayers are being taxed to fund services that they're not using. That's a mixture of things like the state pension, which we know now is unsustainable. It was based on the idea that each successive generation would be larger than the previous. That now isn't the case because of things like low birth rates. It's a lot of that money is also going to welfare and to social housing and to economically inactive people. You mentioned that term Boris wave. So really starting in 2021, we've seen a massive uptick. We were already at very high levels. We were already bringing in net hundreds of thousands of people a year. We're now bringing in net upwards of 700,000 people a year. I prefer the gross figure because I think it really drives home how big the wave has been. It's been at least 4.5 billion people over 4 years. So at least a city the population of Birmingham every year. The result of that, right? We're told it's going to be great for the economy, and of course it hasn't been. The economy's flatlined while immigration has skyrocketed. And the reason is that we're not bringing in very high skill, very hardworking, tax-paying, go-getting migrants from America or from Europe. Our migration mix has actually changed as well since Brexit. Because of the rules, post-Brexit rules and the way that those rules have changed, we've seen a massive uptick in non-EU migration. 1 million Indians in the last 4 years, several 100,000 people from Pakistan, from Nigeria, from Bangladesh, etc. And we know that those people are likely over their lifetimes to be to not be net contributors, to be net detractors from the state, particularly if they bring dependents, which many of them bring family members over. Many of them are from countries where it's not normal for women to work. So we're talking about you come over, you do 5 years of work, you get what's called indefinite leave to remain. That's the settlement status. You are then entitled to claim welfare, social housing, to use the NHS, to bring over dependents, etc. That is being funded by hardworking young professionals in cities like London, in cities like Edinburgh, etc. That is the social contract turned on its head. And there's one more aspect to this as well. If things couldn't get even worse, believe me, they can. It's the British state we're talking about. Crime is a basic one, right? Crime and the way that we enforce laws. We are stricter than ever on law-abiding citizens, whether that's on things like speech or anybody with a white. I've got a friend trying to get married to an American girl, very nice, very high earning, etc. The Home Office has given him hell. He's had to go through numerous hoops and clear numerous hurdles, etc. If he'd come over on a small boat and then wanted to bring his family 5 years later, he would have had no problem whatsoever. So that's the other aspect of the social contract that's going wrong, this whole anarcho-tyranny dimension, which is that the state is kind of tyrannical towards the most law-abiding citizens, but fairly anarchic when it comes to enforcing the law against the least law-abiding.
Why do you think there isn't as much public uproar about these things as you'd expect? I mean, I could probably make slightly snide comments about, well, people will just get locked up if they do, but that won't be helpful. But you would think that given there is this clear distinction being drawn between the law-abiding and those who aren't, and potentially even, just to put a finer point on it, those not born in the country being given preferential treatment over those born in the country, or seeking to marry those who are more culturally aligned. Is the reason why there's less said about this because we have a taboo that governs us? I know Eric Kaufman talks about it. People are just afraid to talk about things like differences in race and culture because of the potential social consequences to that, and also for those who truly believe in the sacralization of those groups. Is that part of it, or is it simply it's just not in the public mind for whatever reason?
So I think the public do talk about it. I mean, I grew up in a kind of ex-Brit-making town in North Wales. Right, people there talk about it. Believe me, right? They watch TV news, they read the newspapers, they see the cases, they're outraged. You will often hear people say, make comments like, I'm not endorsing the comment, but you'll hear people make comments like, you couldn't build a church in Saudi Arabia, why can you build a mosque in this country? That's something I've heard from normal members of the public numerous times. So the idea of unequal treatment is actually, it's very widely felt. The problem is political. It's that those norms are so distant from the kind of norms that govern political life here in Britain. We have one of, we have quite a closed political culture in terms of what's regarded as acceptable in that world. We have a media that is very good at gatekeeping. It's gotten less good at gatekeeping of time, and I think that's why they're worried about things like online safety. They're concerned about the power that the internet gives ordinary people to access and voice these views. Things like GB News as well. I mean, look up how Ofcom has behaved around GB News, trying to shut the channel down, sanction it for bringing on Rishi Sunak, to discuss his views with members of the public. Lest we forget that on Good Morning Britain, at the height of the riots over the summer, we had Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, interviewed by her husband, Ed Balls. It's not actually about whether these news channels are politically impartial. I think there is a genuinely political angle to the way that some of our regulators behave that is allowed, is enabled by the political and ethical norms of people who govern us. It is only that the public has been talking about this stuff for so long and that it's gotten so bad that people are starting to act on it. And we're seeing in the polls Reform doing very well. People, even the Conservative Party has come a long way over the last decade in terms of the way it talks about these things. You wouldn't see David Cameron talking about some of the things that frontbench Conservative MPs now talk about. And even the Prime Minister, even Keir Starmer, has accepted what he calls open borders experiment, accepted that was wrong. So we're moving, I'm not going to say inexorably, but we're moving slowly in the right direction. But it's not because the public is waking up to this, right? The public, I think, is actually fairly aware. It's the problem is politicians. And, the other side of that coin is that even those politicians which have advocated for the public mood on this question or on this set of questions have been very bad at thinking about it in systemic terms. They've thought about it primarily in individual terms. So they look at, I read a thread yesterday about a Turkish drug dealer who was told that Home Office was told they couldn't deport the man because it would interrupt his right to a family life. So, it's very easy to kind of get annoyed about that case because it's clearly a terrible decision that's going to have a negative impact on the country and on the level of safety that we have in the country. But even politicians who've been willing to say that have been very poor at identifying the underlying structural factors, right? A lot of this stuff is legislative. It's the law. I often say this about free speech too. That is the law. The law should be different, but it is the law. And advocates in Westminster, such that they are only just now catching up to some of the structural causes of things like high migration, the transfer of wealth from working age people to people from abroad, etc., etc.